Greetings, friends. My name is Vitaly Portnikov. Donald Trump has once again mentioned Greenland, the annexation of which he famously discussed in his first weeks as President of the United States. And then he seemingly forgot about it. Although, as we all remember, both the American president's son, Donald Trump Jr., and Vice President J.D. Vance visited the island back then. Now Trump is once again talking about the need to annex Greenland and has appointed Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry as his permanent representative on this issue. Landry notes that he would be honored to annex Greenland to the United States. However, there is no real logic to Trump's statements and actions. He justifies the need to annex Greenland by citing U.S. national security concerns. But America has military bases in a number of countries whose annexation is not even being discussed. Greenland, meanwhile, is an autonomous part of the Danish Kingdom, a NATO ally of the United States. It would seem that the most logical step would be to negotiate an increase in the American military presence in the region. This is especially true since it truly serves the national interests of the United States, the national interests of European countries, the national interests of Denmark, and the national interests of the Greenlanders themselves, as it reliably protects them from any claims by the People's Republic of China or the Russian Federation. Therefore, one suspects that this is not so much about the national interests of the United States, but rather about Trump's inner circle and the American president himself exploiting these national interests for access to Greenland's natural resources. And surprisingly, in this case, Trump doesn't even bother to invoke international law. The United States has no legal right to annex Greenland. Greenland is an integral and autonomous part of Denmark. Its people have the right to independence. And if the majority of Greenland's residents truly support this independence, then the United States can negotiate with the people and government of Greenland about annexing the country to the United States. For now, we are witnessing a Putin-style policy. Moreover, Donald Trump justifies this policy in much the same way Putin justified the occupation and annexation of Crimea, with historical claims, reminders of the distant past, and claims that if Danish ships were in Greenland 300 years ago, then American ships could have been there too. And yet, the rights of Greenland's indigenous population, the majority of the island's inhabitants, are ignored with the same demonstrative indifference with which Vladimir Putin ignores the rights of Crimea's indigenous peoples or the residents of those Ukrainian regions currently occupied and annexed by the Russian Federation. This is precisely why Trump's position is dangerous for several reasons. The first is that the American president's actions legitimize Russian policy. If Donald Trump can lay claim to the territories of other states that have no connection to the United States, citing American national security concerns, then why can't the Russian Federation or the People's Republic of China advance similar political programs? And why should Russia be condemned for the occupation and annexation of Crimea or for the occupation and annexation of other Ukrainian regions? However, let's remember that Donald Trump doesn't particularly condemn and has even spoken about the possibility of the United States recognizing Crimea's status as Russian, which would, of course, be another blow to international law. Perhaps Donald Trump deliberately wants to strike this blow to clear the way for his own imperialist ambitions and turn the United States into a bad remake of the Russian Federation. Another danger, no less serious, is the destruction of Allied relations with Europe. When Putin occupied and annexed Crimea, at least he didn't act against a formal ally of the Russian Federation. Ukraine was a non-aligned state, it was not a member of the Eurasian Economic Union, much less the Collective Security Treaty Organization. And if Russia had any obligations to it, they were roughly the same as the United States under the Budapest Memorandum. Denmark is a true NATO ally of the United States, and its protection is part of the concept of Euro-Atlantic security, a concept that seems to have finally abandoned the corridors of the White House. The United States should be defending Denmark from attempts to occupy part of its territory and from claims to it by some raging imperialist madman. But we are seeing the exact opposite development. Donald Trump himself continues to lay claim to another country's territory, accusing Denmark of not sufficiently ensuring the security of Greenland. But, I repeat, in my opinion, security is merely a pretext for satisfying some new economic needs of those around Trump and, perhaps, the American president himself. That is, the same political vector we are seeing when it comes to settling the war between Russia and Ukraine. Because here, too, it seems Trump's inner circle is thinking not about how to actually end the war and force the aggressor to abandon its attempts to strangle its neighbor, but about the impressive economic prospects that will open up for certain members of the U.S. presidential administration and members of his family. If an agreement with Russia is reached, Putin will fulfill all the generous promises he, both personally and through his special representative, Kirill Dmitriev, is undoubtedly now offering as reliable bait for those negotiating with him. And it is clear that if the United States and the Russian Federation jointly destroy international law, it will be completely unclear where they will be able to hide from the looming global crisis that awaits us. Because it is unrealistic to think that the Americans, Russians, and Chinese will act together in their attempts to destroy international law. Without rules, imperialists will inevitably clash with each other. And since these imperialists possess unfortunate stockpiles of nuclear weapons, one can imagine how many tens of millions of people will die due to a failure to understand, especially by the leaders of democratic countries, the importance of living by the rules. And all this, it would seem, is just an icy island in the Atlantic Ocean. Thank you, friends. Stay tuned to this channel, subscribe to it, subscribe to my social media channels, and to the channels on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, which help develop all resources.